Chapter 2, From Omnivore to Fruitarian in 7 Short Years.
The continuum of consumption. Diet or systems of eating may be viewed as a continuum, a straight line running between two extremes, eating everything and eating nothing. All along the line are major stopping off points, stages of diet which set limitations on what may properly be consumed. I have moved from one extreme to the other on the continuum of consumption. 7 years ago, I began my present dietary journey as a confirmed omnivore, and now I am a fruitarian. Omnivorism, at one extreme of the continuum of consumption, involves eating everything. Most people begin at this point and stay there all their lives. It's the official diet of so-called civilized humanity. Omnivores eat cooked food and they eat raw food. Though they seem to prefer their poison heated, they eat fruits, vegetables, grains, cereals, usually in the form of devitalized breakfast foods, beans, nuts, cheese, eggs, pizza and chitlins, breads, mostly white, cakes, pies, beef, pork, poultry, lamb, fish. They broil their steaks on the backyard barbecue, or they eat their meat raw and appropriately name the barbaric dish tartar steak. Of course, omnivores may impose certain restrictions on their diet. Some call a halt to escargots when they find they're eating snails. Others pass on such delicacies as chocolate-covered ants, grasshoppers, or octopus. But for most omnivores, everything is fair game for consumption, and they are limited only by personal preference. When I was an omnivore, a favorite nightclub routine illustrated one limitation I imposed upon my diet. I would tell of walking into a restaurant down south. I sat down and picked up the menu. Pretty soon the waitress came over to me and said, "We don't serve colored people here." I looked up innocently and said, "That's all right, ma'am. I don't eat them." But outside of that matter of personal taste, anything got past me. Vegetarianism, more properly called lacto-vegetarianism, consists of eating only plant substances, fruits, vegetables, grains, cereals, nuts, etc., along with milk, milk products, eggs, and honey. Unlike omnivores, vegetarians will not eat flesh. They follow a non-flesh diet for humanitarian or health reasons, or a combination of both. It begins to look like President Nixon is adding another reason to the list of points in favor of vegetarianism: the price of food, especially meat. My brother, who's still a meat eater, went into the supermarket the other day and he had to buy his T-bone steak on the layaway plan. I understand food prices are so high that on the last moon shot the astronaut had to give up their Tang for Kool-Aid. Because of food prices, I've noticed a different reaction from people over the past few months. In fact, people used to think I was crazy following the kind of diet I do and fasting so much. But now folks don't ask me why I fast. They ask me how they can do it. If the price of food gets any higher, Nixon will have more people on fasts than Gandhi. Veganism. Veganism is the exclusion of all animal substances from the diet. Vegans reject milk, cheese, eggs, and all foods coming from animals. That, of course, would include Jell-O and other gelatins, since they come from animal hooves. Strict vegans would need to be careful about taking vitamin pills to make sure they are not swallowing a gelatin capsule. Apart from considerations of what a person should or should not eat for health reasons, veganism is based upon the moral conviction that human beings must get things right between themselves and the animal kingdom. Vegans deplore the evil treatment animals receive at the hands of humans, including such activities as hunting, fishing, fur trading, and such places of animal exploitation as slaughterhouses, hen houses, breeding pens, scientific experimental laboratories, and circuses. Vegan writers like Alfred Hyde Haffenden often refer to the Day of Judgment, when the Creator will hold humankind accountable for its relationship to the animal kingdom. Every time I pass a Colonel Sanders Kentucky Fried Chicken stand, I have the same thought. Wouldn't it be wild if Colonel Sanders got to heaven one day and found out God was a chicken? If that ever happens, I sure hope I'm standing there right behind the Colonel. I whisper in his ear, "Go on and tell Chicken Big he's finger licking good." Vegetarianism. Vegetarianism excludes all animal substances and plant seeds from the diet. Vegetarians go a step beyond vegans and rule out grains, legumes, nuts, and all actual seeds. Those who are vegetarian by religious conviction believe that plant seeds were not intended for human consumption. They also feel that eating seeds has stimulated the seed principle in human beings, making them slaves to sex and sensual things. Perhaps that explains why nuts are usually served in cocktail lounges and at parties. Fruitarianism. Fruitarianism is the eating of fruit alone. Fruitarians, I am now one of them, believe that Mother Nature intended her children to be frugivorous or fruit eating. And whether the Holy Bible or the theory of evolution is your particular scripture, there is good reason to accept the fruitarian point of view. In the Bible, chapter 1, verse 29 of the book of Genesis says, "And God said, Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, you shall have them for food." RSV, the King James Version, translate the same verse somewhat differently. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." So the story of creation in the Bible says that fruit is the food human beings are divinely intended to eat, and that meat eating means a fruitarian diet rather than consuming the flesh of animals. And the physical makeup of human beings support this in understanding of divine creation. People have more in common with the frugivorous than the carnivorous or flesh-eating members of the animal kingdom. First of all, flesh-eating animals have a very short intestinal tract. This is necessary because of the highly putrefactive character of the food they eat, namely flesh, or meat in the non-biblical sense of the word. Human beings, on the other hand, have very long intestinal tracts, so it should seem obvious that Mother Nature never intended a meat diet for people. We just don't have the guts for it, so to speak. We shall see later the problem suffered by meat-eating humans when constipation prevents proper elimination and the waste products of a flesh diet remain where they don't belong. Secondly, carnivorous animals are provided with special teeth to seize their prey and tear their flesh from them. Human beings like apes and chimpanzees lack such dental equipment. Apes, for example, could never manage eating the carcass of large animals, nor could humans until they invented knives and forks. A look at the teeth of human beings shows they were intended to eat pulpy fruit, succulent stems, and leaves rather than flesh. Finally, the digestive juices of human beings indicate that Mother Nature did not intend her human children to be carnivores. The digestion of flesh requires great amounts of hydrochloric acid, which is supplied in concentrated form in the bodies of carnivore animals. If humans were intended to eat meat, they would have acid sufficient to digest bone as well as flesh. So fruitarians are content to accept the word of scripture and physical evidence and consume only fruit, direct from plants and trees, in a natural state, fully cooked by Mother Nature's outdoor oven, the sun. Light, air, and moisture. Only fruits and flowers are so directly exposed to Mother Nature's solar energies. The final extreme of the continuum is breatharianism, or eating nothing. It is living entirely on the transcendental plane, breathing in pure air, absorbing the direct light and energies of the sun, bathing in pure water, in other words, living on what some writers call the supersubstantial bread. I personally believe breatharianism to be the highest mode of human living and an entirely possible way of life under ideal circumstances. At the time of this writing, I weigh about 97 pounds, a near 200% reduction from my former weight, and of course, being a 97 pounder has its effect upon race relations, as it has happened upon many other experiences. I've lost so much weight that nonviolence is no longer a tactic, it's a necessity. My current weight reminds me of the old magazine ads for the Charles Atlas bodybuilding course. In case your memory needs refreshing, the ad was a cartoon strip which began with the picture of a skinny, 97-pound weakling lying on a blanket on the beach with his girlfriend. Along comes a muscular, bulging bicep bully who kicks sand in the skinny one's face and challenges him to do something about it. The poor weakling is clobbered and the girl walks off with the bully, somehow having been turned on by the unprovoked display of violence. The dejected weakling returns to his bedroom alone and begins a crash bodybuilding program under the mail order direction of Charles Atlas. In a very few weeks, the weakling builds up his physique, returns to the same beach, beats the hell out of the same bully, and gets back the same girl. I guess you would have to say I am the antithesis of that ad. I became a 97 pounder by choice, having shed almost 200 pounds to get that way. And while a desire to be successfully violent inspired the weakling in the ad to build himself up, it was an aversion to violence and killing in all forms that initiated my slimming down. Now that I know more about proper diet, I think back on the Charles Atlas ad and realize the bully was probably a heavy meat eater, egged on to manly pursuits by the poison in his system. I was born and raised in the ghetto of St. Louis, and like most black families, mine was large and poor. Living in a large, poor family posed problems. For example, there were so many of us kids sleeping in the same bed. If I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, I had to leave a bookmark so I wouldn't lose my spot. We were so poor that one time we got garnished by the newspaper boy. Even though we were poor, I remember once a year my daddy would save up some money, pack up all us kids, and take us out to dinner. Our family was so big, every year it would cost him $125, and that was at a 10-cent hamburger stand. Holidays posed special problems. We never had enough food. I remember one Thanksgiving when my mama came home with a turkey foot, and all of us kids gathered around the pot while mama boiled the foot and we watched it shrink. Then we sat at the table looking at the turkey foot and waiting to dive into it, and mama insisted that we pray over it first. I told her, "Mama, I don't have anything against prayers or anything like that, but if anyone ought to be praying, it should be the turkey that got away from that foot." About the only holiday we would enjoy was Halloween. Halloween was one day in the year we could wear our regular clothes and people might thought we were dressed for the occasion. Every Halloween, when I went to get my meal by trick or treat, folks would look at me and say, "Look at Richard wearing that old man's costume. And he's wearing shoes that look just like feet." As a kid, I was obsessed with food, with good reason. The nutritional concern in our home was always quantity rather than quality of food. It's part of insecurity of being poor. Now I have learned that the less food a person eats, the better, as long as it is in the right kind of food and it composes a balanced diet. But in a poor household where there's always the possibility of no food at all, tendency is to overreact when food is present. At mealtime, I was always encouraged to be an omnivore. Mama would say, "Eat everything on your plate." Being hungry had nothing to do with it, just as hunger never told us when to eat. If it was mealtime and there was food in the house, we ate it. Insecurity about food would never allow poor folks to turn down food. Not only is the worry ever present that one day there may be no food at all, but poor folks tend to believe the myth that the more food you eat, the better nourished and more healthy you will be. Fat person is well fed or healthy. It would not occur to most poor folks that a person who is fat is probably suffering from malnutrition. As I look back at my childhood, I realized I was a junkie. Most of my diet consists of junk: candy, Pepsi Cola with salted peanuts, Twinkies, cupcakes, donuts, cookies, popcorn at the movies, whatever I could get my hands on and my teeth into. In those early days of my youth, I didn't eat soul food as much as stole food. I fed myself out of my own pocket, whatever I could steal or earn. Actually, some of the food I got inside my home as a kid started out as stole food and became soul food. My mama would bring home food she got by raiding the pantry of the white folks she worked for, and she'd cook it up. Since canned foods were too expensive for poor folks, most of the vegetables I ate as a kid were fresh, but they were always cooked. The meat was usually fried. The only time we kids ate fresh fruit was when we were sick. I used to think of fresh fruit as medicine, the same as cod liver or castor oil, and would therefore reject it. Now I know that fresh fruit and vegetables and their juices are the best medicine in the world. When I went to the restaurant or lunch counter to feed myself out of my own pocket, I never ordered a regular meal. I always had a bowl of chili and a hamburger or a hot dog. At the Chinese restaurant, it was always fried pork and rice. I would say about 80% of everything I ate as a kid fell into the junk category, and I suffered because of it. But until I learned more about nutrition, I never knew why. I had severe rheumatism, arthritis, stomach, and sinus trouble as a kid. Sometimes the pain was so bad, I would lie in bed at night and cry all knotted up in a ball. It never dawned on me that my mother nature was talking to me. My diet improved somewhat when I became interested in track in high school, and I tried to lay off the junk diet. And when I got to college on a track scholarship, my diet improved even more. I ate more regular, balanced meals than ever before, though even the educated college kitchen was ignorant of Mother Nature's teaching. When I left college and settled down in Chicago to try and make it on my own, I reverted. The wolf was at my door once again. I concentrated on how to earn some rent money and survive, and by this time I had added alcohol and cigarettes to my omnivorous diet. January 13, 1961 was the beginning of my state career. People who have read the story of my life may remember that date as the night of my big break in show business. I was called into the Chicago's Playboy Club that evening to fill in for the regular comedian, Professor Irwin Curry. It turned out that the room had been booked by a convention of frozen food executives from the Deep South, and when I arrived at the club, the management suggested I consider not going on, but I decided to go on anyway. And after some very tense opening moments, I won over the crowd, got a standing ovation, and scored a huge success. From that night on, I could eat anything. The best restaurants replaced candy stores, lunch counters, and delicatessens. I was still feeding myself out of my own pocket, but that pocket was much fuller now, and I could eat all the meals I never had as a kid. I was wealthy enough to buy the richest meals in the most expensive eating places, and I was determined to satisfy every taste I ever had. I was realizing an omnivore's dream. I would go into a restaurant and say, "Give me everything." I never made a choice between items on the menu. I just ordered 3, 4, 5, 6 dinners, whatever attracted my eye and excited my taste buds. My table at a restaurant looked like a combination ocean and barnyard, as the waiter delivered lobster, steak, chicken, pork chops, and barbecue ribs in a single serving. Not that I would eat every bite. Few of the best omnivores could have pulled that off, but I stuffed myself and made sure I satisfied every taste. I ate as much as I wanted and as often as I wanted. I would eat as many times a day as time permitted or inclination suggested. I ate regular meals and between meal snacks. I continued to smoke 3 or 4 packs of cigarettes a day, and I washed it all down with a daily fifth of scotch. By the old standards of my ghetto youth, I should have been healthy. I was well fed, which meant I ate a lot. I got fatter and fatter. I wore suits with double-breasted vests, which stylishly covered my expanding belly. But even the best of fashion was no comfort when I sat down. On an airplane, I was always unbuttoning the waist of my pants before fastening my seatbelt. But I wasn't healthy, of course, far from it. I had my excruciatingly painful stomach trouble and my bad sinuses. It is very strange how food and career have crisscrossed in my life. That convention of frozen food execs at the Playboy Club started me on the road to fame in show business. My new status led to my first involvement in the civil rights movement of the 1960s and the philosophies of nonviolence which I learned from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during my involvement in the civil rights movement was first responsible for my change in diet. I became a vegetarian in 1965. I had been a participant in all of the major and most of the minor civil rights demonstrations of the early 60s, including the March on Washington and the Selma to Montgomery March under the leadership of Dr. King. I became totally committed to nonviolence, and I was convinced that nonviolence meant opposition to killing in any form. I felt the commandment, thou shalt not kill, applied to human beings, not only in their dealings with each other, war, lynching, assassinations, murder, and the like, but in their practice of killing animals for food or sport. Animals and humans may suffer and die alike. Violence causes the same pain, the same spilling of blood, the same stench of death, the same arrogant, cruel, and brutal taking of life. One night, during a nightclub engagement in San Francisco, while sitting in a hotel room in the wee hours of the morning talking with my comedy writer, Jim Sanders, I made the decision never to eat meat again. I had become firmly convinced that the killings of animals for food was both immoral and unnatural. Human beings are the most beautifully and brilliantly constructed machines in the universe. They are endowed by nature with a wisdom and intelligence surpassed by no other creature. As a human being and the beneficiary of Mother Nature's endowment of mind and body, I refused to accept that I had to stoop to the lowliness of killing something to get my dinner. It was a moral decision. It had nothing to do with an understanding of proper diet. I had no desire to lose weight, and I still smoked my 3 or 4 packs of cigarettes a day and drank my 5th of scotch. If it is possible to be an omnivorous vegetarian, I was it. I ate everything in the vegetable line, mostly cooked vegetables. I would go into a soul food restaurant and wipe out the yams, greens, black-eyed peas, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, squash, dressing, everything on the menu but the meat dishes. For a short while, I continued to eat Jell-O until I realized it came from animal hooves, and you usually have to kill animals to get them to give up their hooves. So I stopped eating Jell-O, which was hard to do. When I was younger, I used to have a Jell-O habit. When I couldn't get it, I'd lie in the gutter and shake. I still followed in quantity and frequency the eating pattern of my state career, and my weight jumped up more than 100 pounds. I had weighed about 167 pounds when I became a vegetarian, and I reached a top weight of 288. All of a sudden, I was aware that another change had taken place in my body. My stomach trouble and my sinus trouble had disappeared. The only thing that was different about my way of life was that I no longer ate meat. So I was convinced that meat was responsible for my stomach and sinus ailments. If I had stopped smoking or stopped drinking when I became a vegetarian, I would have sworn that alcohol or tobacco was responsible for my physical problems. The next major change in my diet came in 1967. That spring, I ran as the independent write-in candidate for mayor of Chicago. Mayor Richard Daley was my most formidable opponent, and when the votes were counted, Mayor Daley had received enough of an edge to win another term. When you say the votes are counted in Chicago, you really mean it. They are counted and counted and counted. In Chicago, you seldom hear of a candidate on Mayor Daley's machine ticket demanding a recount. The chances are the candidate's votes have already been recounted several times, added up, and all the recounts reported as the total vote. Chicago is the only city in the country where, on election night, the national television networks show reruns. The 1972 elections were a blow to the daily machine in Chicago. For example, Daniel Walker, an anti-machine candidate, won the election for governor. Governor Walker first came to the national attention when he issued a commission report after the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago saying the Chicago police rioted. After the 72 elections, I wouldn't have been surprised to see Mayor Daley issue a report saying the Chicago voters did the same thing. But I campaigned hard in 1967 and made a point. Candidacy for mayor of Chicago and my later write-in candidacy for president of the United States in 1968 was intended to illustrate that in a democracy, the voters should have not only the right to elect, but also the right to select. Usually, the voters have only the opportunity to choose between candidates someone else has already named to be on the ballot. A voter who wrote my name on the ballot was holding a nominating convention and casting a vote at the same time. During my campaign for mayor, a lady stopped by my campaign headquarters while I was out on the streets and dropped off salads for my staff and myself. Since I was not there, she left her name, Dr. Alvinia Fulton, and her address. When I returned, I refused to eat the salad since I didn't know who Dr. Fulton and was suspicious of anybody I didn't know trying to feed me something while I was campaigning to overthrow the daily machine. I was afraid someone might be trying to poison me. A few months after the election, I told my wife, Lillian, we really should go by and see that lady who sent the salads to campaign headquarters. We did, and our conversation began. As I said before, food and career have strangely crisscrossed in my life. It is the same with my career in social protest. When I first became involved in the civil rights movement, people used to ask me, have demonstrations hurt your career? I've always answered, the proper question is, has my career got in the way of my demonstrations? My career involves my work as a comedian, lecturer, author, recording artist, television and film personality. My vocation involves my participation in the struggle for human dignity, the human rights movement. The increased knowledge of proper diet has accompanied my deeper understanding of my vocation. My vocation, which began in the civil rights movement, has now been expanded to include the human rights and peace movements. Thus, my expanded vocation led to the next major change in my diet. In talking with Dr. Fulton, I kept hearing of the beneficial aspects of fasting. Like most people, I was afraid to go on a long fast. All of my life I had been told, if you don't eat, you'll die. I had read about Gandhi's fast, and I greatly admired the man, but his dedication and commitment was a lesson from history rather than a shared experience. I wanted to do something dramatic and personal to protest the continued slaughter in Vietnam. Dr. Fulton had fasted many times. She had prescribed fasts for her patients. I became more and more convinced I, too, should go on a long fast, at least 30 days. So I decided, in the later days of 1967, to take only distilled water for nourishment, beginning Thanksgiving Day and continuing until New Year's Day. 1968, my fast was for moral reasons as a social protest. Dr. Fulton must have sensed my uneasiness with the decision. She told me, if you're really serious about this fast, I'll go on it with you. She did. Not only did she fast right along with me, but she guided and counseled me every step of the way. She told me how to prepare for the fast by cleaning out my body. She put me on a diet of fruit juice 7 days prior to Thanksgiving, and she told me to cleanse my colon with enemas and to continue the enemas after the fast began. Under the direction of Dr. Fulton, which started out as a kind of hunger strike, became a scientific fast. The first fast was the experience of my life. I started out weighing 280 pounds, and on New Year's Day, I was under 100 pounds. I had become that 97-pound weakling, but felt stronger and healthier than ever before. I maintained my usual hectic schedule throughout the fast, traveling to 57 cities in 40 days. I gave 63 lectures. On the weekends preceding Christmas, I worked the Village Gate nightclub in New York City, doing 3 shows a night. It was at the gate that one of the funniest incidents of my first fast occurred. Well into my performance, I had got up from the stool I usually use in my act and was pacing back and forth across the stage, microphone in hand. At one point, I made a dramatic gesture, swinging my arm away from my body suddenly. My wedding band went sailing across the room. I had lost so much weight, my ring no longer fit my finger. The wedding band was recovered, and my marriage is still very much intact. My first 40-day fast was more of a protest against the Vietnam War than most people realize. I really thought I was going to die. I would come back to a hotel room somewhere after giving a lecture, flop down on the bed, and fall asleep. Then I'd wake up in the middle of the night and pinch myself to see if I had died in my sleep. I never died before, so I began to think, wow, maybe this is what death feels like, one everlasting pinch. So I would call Dr. Fulton in Chicago, and she would reassure me. More important, she would tell me exactly what was going to happen on each day of the fast. When Dr. Fulton told me that at the end of the 3rd week of fasting, I would feel a resurgence of energy like I had never felt before, well, I won't say I disbelieved her. I'll just say I didn't believe it at the time. But of course it was true, because at that period of the fast, the body begins consuming itself, ridding the system of stored up poisons and waste that have been there for years. On January 9th, 1968, I broke my first fast with fruit juice. At the Fultonia Health Food Center in Chicago, after a long fast, Dr. Fulton says it is necessary to take a day of fruit juice for every 5 days you have been fasting. So I needed 8 days of juice before I could begin eating again. What began as an act of social protest, a political act, became in the process of living it a purifying act in mind, body, and spirit. As my body was cleansed of years of accumulated impurities, my mind and spiritual awareness were lifted to a new level. I felt closer to Mother Nature and all of her children. I felt more in tune with the universe, order of existence. I was now aware of the meaning of the words I used to hear in church. The body is the temple of the spirit. Just as Jesus drove the money changers out of the temple, fasting had driven the devils of my former diet from my own temple, and my life changed completely. After 3 months after my first fast, I had a sip of scotch and soda, and the taste was repugnant. That old favorite devil of mine was gone forever. I then remember how bad liquor tastes to most people the first time they try it. Folks say you have to cultivate a taste for booze. Even though the body is saying no, people repeat alcohol until they got used to it. With my body cleansed from fasting, I had a new hunger. A hunger to know more about nutrition and proper food so that my temple would remain clean. I visited health food stores everywhere I traveled. I would head straight to the book rack and buy every book on health and nutrition I could get my hands on. I found more wisdom there than I found on any college campus I've ever visited, and I lectured in 300 colleges a year. The more I read, the more I talked with Dr. Fulton, and the more I experimented with my own diet, the closer I came to the fruitarian point of view concerning nutrition. After my first fast, I adopted a diet that included only raw foods. I became convinced I should leave my cooking to Mother Nature. I have fasted many times since my first 40-day fast, sometimes for health reasons and sometimes for vocational reasons. The longer fasts have been the results of my vocation and the struggle for human dignity. Beginning in 1968, my vocation has involved me in the fasts every summer. Summer of 1968, I served 45 days in the state prison of Olympia, Washington, as a result of my participation in a demonstration with the Nisqually Indians, who were demanding their fishing rights. In the summer of 1969, I served 45 days in Chicago's Cook County Jail as a result of leading daily demonstrations during the summer of 1965, protesting de facto segregation in the Chicago public schools. During both periods of confinement, I took only distilled water for nourishment. In 1970, I spent most of the summer in a house I had rented in Toronto, Canada. I fasted 81 days on distilled water. It was a public fast, which I announced to the news media. I was fasting to call attention to the narcotics problems in America. I explained in announcing my fast, which I originally intended to last 40 days, that fasting cleanses the body of all impurities, that the bad food most people eat each day is flushed out, and the body is given a fresh start for a new and more healthy future. I said further that I hoped my fast would help people to recognize the poisons infecting the national body, to see the need for cleansing the nation of impurities so that America could have a fresh start toward a new and more healthy future. Of course, I was also fully aware of the private benefits of fasting, so my fast had public and private reasons. I was trying to make a personal witness to the tragedy and hypocrisy of the drug problem in America. Tragic because America's youth suffer most from the deadly effects of narcotics. Hypocritical because the American system allows drug traffic to continue while berating the drug user for their afflictions. I refuse to believe that a 9-year-old kid could find the heroin man anytime he needed help in sending destruction through his young veins, yet law enforcement couldn't find him. The pusher, the supplier, the smuggler. I refuse to believe that the same Federal Bureau of Investigation that couldn't prevent narcotics from being smuggled into the country seemed to have no trouble at all stopping espionage activity, keeping America's security secrets from being smuggled out of the country. At the time of this writing, I am on a fast which began April 24, 1971. While speaking at an outdoor rally in San Francisco, I was moved once again to make a personal witness in protest against the senseless killing in Indochina. I announced at the end of my speech that I would not eat any solid food until the war is over in Vietnam. I have been on a liquid diet ever since, taking fresh fruit juice for nourishment. Perhaps a cleansing fast is needed by the American peace negotiators to see the truth about the war from a clean, pure perspective. I wonder how many bogged down negotiations have taken place over lunch and dinner. If eating hasn't ended the slaughter, fasting should be worth a try. But the American way of life still favors the consumptions of both meals and countries. The country has moral as well as physical constipation. It is finally over. I shall maintain a fruitarian diet, which means I traveled the most of the way along the continuum of consumption. I don't know if I'll ever reach the final breatharian stage completely, though I have had limited encounters with this plane of living over the past summer, 1972. At the end of August and until the early part of September, I went on 2 7-day total fasts. No food, no water, no solid or liquid nourishment of any kind. My diet consists only of air, sunlight, bathing in pure water, and frequent enemas with water warmed by the direct light of the sun. My first 7-day total fast took place in Jalapilla, Mexico. While I was staying at the Hotel Lagunita, I was accompanied by my close friend Adam D. Burgos, a Chicago attorney and veteran faster who also completed the 7-day total fast. 10 days later, I went on another 7-day total fast at the Milk River Mineral Baths on the beautiful island of Jamaica. The Milk River Baths are among the unsung miracles of Mother Nature, the water there being as therapeutic as any in the world. I hope some readers of these pages will do themselves a great favor and visit Milk River. As you can see from my nutritional autobiography, I started out in life poor with almost nothing, and I ate everything. Now I have almost everything. More often than not, I choose to eat nothing. But more than any wealth or fame I have achieved, I consider my journey along the continuum of consumption the real success of my life. I have learned that the highest value in life is really a family affair. It is coming home to Mama. No matter how far away you may have traveled, Mother Nature is always waiting for your return.